This is Johnny Wordslinger with Mikey DePaul Jr., and he's reading his foreword to his story.
Hi, my name is Mikey DePaul Jr., and I'd like to read you a section of my foreword. Okay. The words that always tend to irritate a person can lead to this. A dragon would never do that. That's just how it is. Deal with it. End of subject. I wish with everything that I am that I could tell you how many times I heard the first part of that statement and how many people said it to me. For years, I submitted to it just to stop the argument that people needed to dominate. When it progressed to the final sentences above, in December of 2017, I finally realized and learned that it was not the fact that a dragon anything. How do they absolutely know that? Those people just had to have dominance. That is when that word actually made me smile, and I thought about a character of both equally good and evil nature, with a will that could not be beaten. Better yet, if this character's will could be beaten, it would never happen twice. Why? Because that character then dominated that very weakness of itself that was dominated by another. A completely unique dragon that had a dominance of her own will to everything. Now that I had my imagination turning in spirals to endless possibilities and new concepts, and forbidden things among subjects with dragons due to those words that echoed in my mind with every thought, a dragon would never do that. At that moment, I kept thinking of the something news and didn't even have to hear people physically say those negative words of dominance, and they were there. So I thought to myself, this one final self-boost. Write what comes to your head and see what happens in the long run. Don't let anything dominate your will to write it, and just write it. Of course, when people asked me what I was doing when I dedicated all of my spare time to this story and I started writing at the end of March of 2018 after 3 long months of contemplating this character and many others to lead to her introduction from my imagination, take a wild guess what they said and did. Yep, again, you have no idea how many said, that won't happen. It wouldn't be like this. Your concept is wrong. And yes, a dragon would never do that. So, other than having to deal with their anger because I relieved them of their power of dominance over me and quit doing what they wanted me to do, as well as listening to them, I wrote and kept writing this story how I wanted, and had the dragons doing what they said dragons can't and would never do. At that point, I only faced one real challenge that could dominate my plan of sharing this story once it was finished. I faced the same problem that every other author and other storyteller of dragons does. I am presenting some of those dominating questions and words of authors before us into it. Vengeance, consequence, domination, protection, innocence, etc. The something news are what I wanted to tackle with the what ifs. Some of these words are names of characters, and others are named with these words as their raw meaning as a personality. This is my story of dragons, and I have the will to imagine whatever I want a dragon to be, or whatever I want it to do, right? But I was still thinking about who told those amazing writers before myself and many others that a dragon would never do that, or negative words like them. Did these authors come across this question or have my same thought? If so, how was any fantasy book or story with a new concept of dragons ever allowed to be published or shared if all of those authors before us succumbed to the words, a dragon would never do that? How was my question? Someone, somewhere, with an open mind that didn't just submit to a personality of dominance beside them, Someone in a company, boardroom, or the such enjoyed the writer's imaginative fantasy story and wanted to share it with others as well. The rules were broken, and it found its way across the realm of fantasy readers, one way or another, because of the will to share a piece of someone's unruled imagination. In the past, at some point, the something news and the what ifs had finally acquired dominance over the very dominant personalities that spoke against them with rules when it came to fantasy. This was my own answer to myself. I had to write those words and say them aloud so I could hear and believe them. It was the only real answer that had any true value of meaning. If not, then only one fantasy book would exist for any mythical creature or situation. Now, you and I both know that there are thousands and thousands of fiction, fantasy, and sci-fi books proving my point to be correct. So, I refused, and still refuse, to just accept the answer that gave no answer. The one answer that was given to me and used specifically for dominance. A dragon would never do that. That's just how it is. Deal with it. End of subject. But no matter how hard I fought to just dismiss those words from my mind, that answer with no answer was still dominating me. It dominated me like no tomorrow could ever come. The first sentence dominated my imagination, I say again, for years. Then it tried for the very last time when I finished writing. I smiled, and I finally won. I will tell you why in just a minute. The length of that answer, with no answer, I have to say, wasn't what irritated me. Every single word in it completely melted away until one word took all of its place. This one word left a wide open magnet of an unfathomable power of dominance, causing anger to a word that needs no introduction of definition to any of us, but I will explain it, for it is a tyrannical word when it is said alone and nothing else follows it. It can dominate almost any situation for the sheer loss of the control of our own emotions to anger versus the person who spoke it as an answer. Are you ready? The word is because. Take a moment and let it sink into your mind like I have. Okay, now, did you just think about a memory in your past where someone said that single word as an answer to you with no other words to give an actual reason? And when they did this, you didn't, even just for a moment, want to reply to them with a sudden horrible act of violence in some way or another, even if it was just a threat in your mind and you overcame the true act in reality. Me too. That single word answer gave them the most dominance over us that had ever been taken. War is a reoccurring fate due to the tyranny of others. Now, are you ready for a real harsh reality? They enjoyed it for the simple fact that they could do it. They caused your frustration just to make you the bad person that doesn't want to submit to what they say. You know this is true. I am only putting it into words so that you can read it. I realize, and so do you, that some love and friendships can be based on sarcasm like this. But each and every one of us knows that difference between true sarcastic fun and the cruelty of truly spiteful dominance. Now, if I were ever told those words again, a dragon would never do that, my reply to that person would have to be, you have a closed imagination. You are entirely too bound to the dominance of rules to have an open one. The saddest part of that fact is that now you are trying to dominate others with those rules. All of the wonderful emotions of enjoyment that could have come from your imagination as well as others are lost because of it. You have robbed yourself and now you are robbing others. This is because you have such a closed mind that you won't allow someone else's free-minded will to beat a simple impossibility with a smile and a thought. I do my best to give a reason if I use the word because. It is the actual reason the word exists. to give or explain the reason. The most dominant ways that I have heard that a person can be rude by saying because in different words are, well, if you don't know, then I'm not going to tell you. And when I want your opinion, I'll give it to you. SERAGONS Curse, The Price of a Red Dragon's Love, is a story that I wrote breaking many of those rules concerning dragons. I fully admit that I purposely, undeniably, and specifically broke them with complete disregard because of those rules' very existence. Because those rules came from the mouths of dominant people, I was tired of hearing what a dragon could or could not and would never do. So, deal with it. I wrote a story about what happened when dragons could, would, and did, just like other authors and tellers of fantasy story have, that had new and entertaining concepts. Several forbidden subjects are touched in this story, and I used my own imagination to give reasons to you of how and why I broke the rules, instead of just because. Something I and several other open-minded fantasy lovers were never allowed due to the power of the dominance of others that pushed those rules as law. So, to the person that reads this and wants nothing more than to degrade and ridicule it and me for not succumbing to your personal perception of domination with those rules of dragons, why did I write it? What made me even think that I could get away with writing it? And how dare I write it? Because I can as well as could, and I wanted to share my imagination with others that might enjoy it, whether you like it or not, just like the other people who wrote stories that you couldn't stand due to the fact that someone else also cast aside your power of dominance that wanted closed-minded rules over them as well. Now, I said that I would tell you how I won the battle of being dominated by that statement. A dragon would never do that. After I wrote it, I asked a few people to read it before it was even edited, proofread, or worked with in any way. A rough draft copy. One of them said this, that they couldn't wait for it to get published so that they could read the second book when I was done writing it because they liked it so much. Without including the words of some of the others, that alone was worth the years of frustration to me. I won. By the way, to the dominant people who degrade others any chance they get, how does it feel to be dominated?